Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Goldfish Report. I'm your host, Louisa. This is our 200th Goldfish Report, and we have a very special report for you today. It's going to feature the subject of mind control, MK Ultra, and the people who are behind it and responsible for it and what their ultimate agenda is. And to discuss this with me, we're going to be focusing on a particular document that I mentioned earlier in the week in a video that YouTube removed, which is now on BitChute. So you can find the Goldfish Report on BitChute now. It looks like with the censorship that's happening, they're deleting YouTube accounts, and we have 2 strikes now for videos we've done in the past. And suddenly now I do fear that it's imminent that the Goldfish Report YouTube channel will be deleted as well. So we will be on BitChute. And you can also find us, of course, on our blogs and websites, and all of that is already in the description section of our videos. And the document that I shared earlier in the week is called Aquarius Group Operation Briefing, and we will be discussing this in detail with our guests. And I'd like to introduce them right now. And our first guest that we have with us is Winston Shrout. He is my co-host of the Country Roads Reports. Welcome, Winston. Thanks for joining me.
Hello.
Our next guest is another returning guest on the Goldfish Report. Always happy to have our friend Miles Johnston from the Basis Project with us. Welcome, Miles.
Well, welcome to you from a nicely wintry storm force. Of course, it comes from Russia. Lots of snow here outside.
And a former guest of both the Goldfish Report and the Basis Project. Joining us today is Sergeant Dan McBolin, the third of the U.S. Air Force. Welcome to the Goldfish Report, Dan.
It's nice to be here. Hi, guys.
Okay, there he is. Hey, how you doing? So thank you so much for joining us, and I'm really excited to have this distinguished group of gentlemen joining me to discuss this because they're all very knowledgeable on this subject. We have, again, as I had said, I'm going to screen share this document, and what I'd like to do is have commentary from each of our panelists today to discuss and basically we're going to be providing some critical analysis of this document. What does it mean? What does it, how far in the agenda are we, and is there anything we can do about this? So I'm going to start by screen sharing this document. Let me first start by, it's kind of like a preface. This is QAnon. This is the QAnon page where he's been posting. We believe that QAnon is the top military brass that's working with Donald Trump, President Trump right now, to drain the swamp. And here on a post of February 15th, there's a post regarding the MK Ultra. Here, Q is making a reference to something called a hive mind. He's talking about, have any recent shooters received therapy in the past? Be the autist we know you are. We are chosen for a specific reason, or you are chosen. He's talking about discoveries must be original or organic. Hive mind. And then someone comments about MK Ultra. And then, of course, Q comments about this again. He's talking about ability to use frequencies, incoming, modify code program over X period, mobile phone to control target subject, even car control, things like that, automated, like remote controlling cars and things like that, but it's not limited to cars. It's extended to people as well. And the document then that I'm going to be referring to is a document that you can see is published on stopthecrime.net. And here, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to give an opinion, but I'm going to, about some background information about what they know about these kinds of programs. This is called the Aquarius Group Operations Briefing, and it's the primary control group of mind control procedures. And similar to Majestic 12, the Aquarius Group is a secret committee of scientists, military leaders, government officials, and many are the same corporate agencies involved in the NASA war plan. And of course, our viewers may or may not be familiar with this Agenda 21, Agenda 30, and now Miles has just informed me there's an Agenda 45. It is a mass depopulation agenda. It is implemented by the deep state or oligarchs. And let me just start from there, because on page 1, it talks about electromagnetic, radio wave, and microwave pulse warfare. That has great advantages in the desired subject or population. So this can be done on an individual, or it can be done on a group of people, let's say protesters, that can maybe turn it into a mob situation. But they have no knowledge of the procedure being implemented. So just based on that, let's start with Miles, if you don't mind, Miles. What do you know about the types of frequencies, the types of mind control? Can you give us an idea of what does this mean to someone who might be tuning into this for the first time? Help them break it down for us and help us understand.
Well, actually, Louisa, that's an improper question. You ask, what do you know? The proper question would be, what don't you know? Anybody's listened to Miles?
Well,
Just joking.
I'm trying to see if I can get anything in shot here. Well, having worked on both, it's 30 years ago, within the next couple of weeks, that we put on a 1.2 megawatt FM pirate on the Irish border. And you have to understand, what on earth do we have to put a 1.2 million watt ERP pirate station broadcasting from the Irish border? Again, there's a whole lot of reasons there. And we based our philosophy of doing that on a radio ship called Radio Caroline, which was fitted out in the 1960s because they couldn't get the records played on the radio. So if you think that through, somebody can't get the record played on the radio because it's not part of some kind of club. And yet, okay, why do records get played on the radio? Why is it so important that certain records get played on the radio, but your record can't get played on the radio? So we're talking high power AM radio, and then radio hams sort of twigged in. Radio hams are very sort of against pirate radio broadcasters because they had to work a lot for their license to do all this ham radio stuff, and then they realized the ham radio thing was it was basically they were so confined, and then there's something changed when amplitude modulated public broadcast radio commenced. So the radio hams noticed something. So we're going back to the very start of public broadcasting, after the original sort of crystal set stuff that was sort of around and people could sort of pick something up. There was so much raw power in the air that all you needed was a little diode which connected to a set of carbon microphones, and you can actually pick the electricity and signal up on a set of headphones. We all sort of hugged in those days. So, and then the BBC was a British Broadcasting Company, and then it became the British Broadcasting Corporation. So something was being done to AM radio that was important enough for the BBC in Britain to maintain its popular music service on network on AM until 1989. Whereas in the States, this was a network feeding the whole of the UK on AM radio. Yet, because one of the first uses of the Telstar satellite when it first went up wasn't for communications of data telemetry and all that sort of stuff. They were transmitting brain waves on the Telstar satellite to America, who would then do something with it and transmit it back to England. So we're now connecting the actual thought waves of the human brain connecting with broadcasting. Yeah, I'm a pirate. I put on something independent. I'm a rebel. And I see they got help to do that. So whilst I was working with the BBC for 5 years, so a lot of people think that makes me a shill. Oh, I worked for the BBC. I must be, So I've been inside the BBC, outside the BBC, and on the BBC. And I run pirate radio. And the son of one of my best buddies who got the money to put on a megawatt 30 years ago, he was chosen by a company in Belfast called Puppet Labs. Now, Puppet Labs is a company which gives mass hive mind control to computers. And they work with CERN, and they are based in Belfast because the people in Belfast, the ancient Atlanteans who survived the tribe of Dan and all that, who links up with Egypt, going back to whatever crisis happened a long time ago, links up to right now. And he was hired because he was hired because he was a very good network administrator in computers and doing a damn fine job because of that talent. But he was hired, one of the qualities was he was given a video game to play as part of the interview. Hey, why don't you play this? So he goes and plays this, boom, boom, boom. Because his consciousness was linking with the consciousness that was part of the AI in the computers. It was accessing him. He was accessing the computer game. There was a chit chat going on between that, and then the game changed. You got to a different level of the game. Now they knew he was a rebel. They knew all about him, and they brought him in. And then they started giving him a lot of heavy, nasty. He went through a hell of a bad time. This company's out of Portland, Oregon, by the way. The master company, and they chose Belfast because of the Northern Ireland aspect and why Northern Ireland's been there, as opposed to Northern Ireland is practically ring fenced in terms of who's there. The plantation of Ulster going back to the 1600s with Queen Elizabeth, the god Baal, Baal fast. You know, there's a thing called a Giant's Ring in Belfast, energetically connecting. So I'm connecting ancient technologies, gods of the past, the control of populations, Queen Elizabeth I, the foundation of America, right? That's why you speak the accent in America you do, because the likes of me spoke it better before yous lot did.
Well, I'm pretty sure you're the one with the accent, my friend, but let's move along.
Okay, so have I connected a lot of needles here with a thread?
Yeah, no, you certainly have. I think, it's a great perspective because it's a unique perspective. The fact that radio programs and records and things like that were starting. This is infancy. This is mind control in its infancy. So you're saying there was a deliberate plan to.
Yes.
There's a reason why certain records were being played. There were certain messages, whether overt or subliminal, in order to start this. And that's very interesting. Let me just go around, real quick to kind of just see what the aggregate is of everybody's, I guess what the latest is on it too. So who'd like to go next? Dan? Can't hear you. What happened there?
Go ahead, Winston.
Oh, okay. I'll take up a little slack here. Yeah, I was quite interested in what you had mentioned about the Atlantean connection. I'd made that same connection, some years ago, with the splitting of them or whatever you want to call the thing, and some of them going to Egypt and all that kind of thing. And, and I have suspected, based upon that Atlantean connection, that in the case of the one they called Jesus, his lineage was more likely to be Atlantean than it was to be anything else. Have you reached any of those kind of conclusions yourself, Miles?
Well, something we did at my Dublin conference was, as a great astronomer, he's not a great astronomer, but he's been working with a lot of technology involving ETs. Southwest Ireland, Southwest Cork, south in the Atlantic, High Brazil. Have you heard of High Brazil?
No.
High Brazil is a physical landmass that will appear in the ocean at the extreme southwest corner of the continental shelf of Europe, off Ireland, about 300 miles.
Wow.
And it will be a physical landmass. It's on old maps. It's there. You can actually land on it, and then it will disappear.
Let me go with this lineage thing you're talking about here, because let me just bring Sergeant McMullen in. Dan, there's something to be said for a certain lineage and their susceptibility to these frequencies and even mind control. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. Basically, when you're dealing with frequencies, you're dealing with something that resonates all the way down to the DNA, and sometimes down to the RNA. And when you're looking at the past, you're looking at people that were telepathic in nature. Some of them actually had crystals in their body, like there are tiny little crystals in the nose that have a lot of magnetite in it, and it gives you a sense of direction for your brain. Well, these individuals that had this stone in their mind was specific to a particular constellation, and it was a natural occurring stone in the planet with all four of the planets, the Pleiades. And this stone naturally grew there. And when these folks had a difficulty with another species that had come in to try to take them over, they basically left old Lyra and traveled to the Pleiades. It took them a while to terraform the planet. There were 4 basic planets amongst the 7 stars that they could dwell in, and they discovered that a stone was growing in all the children that were born there, and this stone was helping them to become telepathic. It also is the basis for faster than light travel, speed travel, photoradionics. And so as a result, they had this stone when they came to Lemuria, to Atlantia, and they had this stone holds a great deal of, once you understand it and the technology behind it is brought forth, it has great potential. Everybody wants to get their hands across the universe on this stone, but it's only, it grows naturally only on the 4 planets I just mentioned.
So you're saying that certain populations here on the planet have this innate, I guess, crystal and quality, and they are more, are you saying that they are more likely to be mind controlled, or they're more susceptible to these frequencies?
I would just say the opposite, because it gives, and I'm not saying that these individuals have that stone. It's called the Audacia. It's not that they have this stone, but they have ancient memory of it, because your memories are stored in your DNA, and you would remember certain things. And this does come out, and it makes them less susceptible to mind control. But it gives them greater perceptions.
Interesting. There's also a report, in this report, which I'll be sharing in a little while, there's other things that make people resistant or less susceptible, like you're saying, to mind control, which is marijuana, which is, you can understand maybe why it's illegal. And there are opioids. They said opioids also make people less susceptible to programming. But I know something specific about why they tend to select people who are Irish descent or Scotch Irish descent, and native Indian descent, things of that nature. Why do these MK Ultra programs choose these individuals? Dan, do you know why?
Well, they call it the metagene factor. They have the highest manifesting gene as far as the whatever it is, they have the highest quantity of this manifesting gene. They call it the God gene, the manifesting gene, the metagene factor. And they have the greatest ability for multiple paranormal gifts. And as a result, it gives them a great insight on how to, and it's very difficult for the programming to take place in them. So they really have to do heinous things in order to bend the mind to their will, as far as using mind control techniques. And it's very brutal.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm going to screen share a little bit more of this document, and then we're going to have some more comments on this. One of those things that you're talking about is, if you look at here, note page 2, mind control. Chemical and polypharmaceutical saturation has been achieved over the past 20 years of implementation with this purpose in mind, and is achieved by deliberate, overt introduction through exposure or consumption on behalf of the population base in everyday usage of public water supplies, airborne pollutants, and chemical agents in a wide variety of foodstuffs. So what's going to happen is the following document here will outline the mind control procedures from post-World War II to the present. The objective of this briefing is to make all these personnel and some population bases and civilian structure aware of the projects planned for full implementation between 1990 and 1995. We don't know. I presume these have been established. These procedures will allow Aquarius Group organization and other world intelligence groups within the Circle of Seven, which is a new concept, a new term that I haven't heard talked about before in these circles, this alliance to achieve their goals of an unarmed, docile, and compliant world population, if not prevented from doing so. This is what it's about. And so when we move to the first page, we see something here that says COM12 briefing, as it said earlier, similar to Majestic 12. This is mind control operations from a group called Aquarius Group Activities, which is a secret group of people that we described in the beginning. It said here that the purpose of putting this together is the information to follow is meant to be outlined to give PSYOP personnel a brief background and introduction into modern PSYOP warfare techniques. Our purpose in briefing COM unit personnel is to educate concerned team members, as I just said before, the latest projects, operations dealing with mind control, and present-day capabilities. This clearly is not talking about, and when we go to the bottom of the page, let me just read this for a second. Electromagnetic radio waves, electromagnetic, radio wave, like Miles was talking about. Microwave pulse mind warfare has great advantages in that a desired subject or population has no knowledge of the procedure being implemented. And this is very insidious. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to just start, asking our panelists here. This is very insidious stuff. I mean, we're talking about our air. We know about the chemtrails. We know about the GMO foods. And all of this somehow works together. Winston, let me ask Winston about this. You there's chemtrails all the time over the skies over there. And what is the general, mood? Do you feel like there's, something going on? Do you feel you've been here a long time? No, I mean, do you notice a change in the behavior of people around you? So you're near the Portland, Oregon area. So what do you notice?
Well, I mean, again, as has been pointed out, all of your commercial planes have been fitted with the same equipment. So if you live near an airport, you're going to get blasted with it, whether you see chemtrails in the sky or not. Now, the question is, what effect does it have on the population? For the most part, the chemtrails have an effect upon your physicality. But you start talking about the electro pulses and microwaves and all the things that are going on. I think that's probably the thing that's having the more effect on the behavior of people. I mean, getting sick is one thing. You have no energy, you can't get out and do stuff, but the ability to control the way people think and cause them to act in that certain way perhaps is the greatest consideration. Now, just let me say that these concepts, from this Aquarius Group or MKO, it's in the general population. It's commercially available. There are companies that can do those exact same things. And so that kind of mind control would be consumer driven. And it is available. There are companies that can produce that kind of thing where you can actually beam thoughts into people's heads. So it's not just the government. It's not just Aquarius or MK Ultra. There are companies, commercial companies, that can reproduce that kind of technology. And so, again, it has to do with consumer driven agendas.
Okay, I'm going to screen share this. Winston, can you comment? Does this look, look, you've been around here a little bit longer than I have. This is not the kind of, what makes it so hard to convince people this is not normal?
Because they don't look up.
It's because they've got their minds in their phones and then their tablets and they're not looking up. Is it deliberate, yeah. Miles, is that deliberate? Was that part of the plan? Absolutely.
I mean, a lot of people don't look above what's above the store. I mean, you just see the shop or your store. They don't see what's above. They're looking above. Everybody's looking down. Everybody's touching these things, looking down. They're not communicating, so they're not seeing. And then those who do see are dangerous and can be. I mean, this is what's been going on recently here last 4, 5, 6 weeks,
Hmm.
the awake group have been turning against each other with alarming efficiency and vitriol.
I see.
But something that's I noticed the last 2 or 3 days at the Broadcast Video Equipment, the Broadcast Video Expo in East London, was no chemtrails whatsoever over London. None.
Really?
Just snow. But that's interesting because whatever we were being hit with was a very severe storm from Siberia.
Hmm.
So maybe the Russians were blowing all our chemtrails away.
Well, Dan, I think isn't there a connection with the chemtrails and the these towers, these 5G towers? I'm trying to find a picture of them, but here's a picture of HAARP array. What do you know about this? Is there an interaction with the
Yes.
particulates? Can you explain what you know about that?
Yes. Well, basically, they're a bio-applications programming interface in the nano and femto range. And so basically, when they spray these items, they're full of metal. And what happens is you breathe these things in. They're designed to pass beyond the blood-brain barrier and go in and capture your neural synapses. And basically tune you into, it manufactures itself into a microphage once it's past the blood-brain barrier and begins to attack and unzip you or take over, commandeer neurosynapses. And so as a result, you have an integration between the biological applications programming interface module that is in all plasma screen devices. Means that your blood is plasma and the screens are plasma. It makes a great medium between communicating from the computer, communicating with your mind, and your mind communicating with the computer, and it shuts down your brain to the point of critical thinking. Critical thinking skills go out the window, and they have been for years, been going out the window. And as a result, you've got ground wave emergency network, which basically has the ability to incorporate the frequencies that Miles was talking about, because this is AM. This is 24 megahertz at 12 meters. And classified information is transmitted back and forth every day, but it's not necessarily for continuance of government purposes, although they claim that it's for continuance of government and maintenance of, maintaining a government, but it's not. It's actually designed to influence the plasma screen devices. It's also integrated into controlling the 800 megahertz cellular phone, 8 and 900 or 23 centimeters, is designed to perpetrate your head. It does the most damage, actually, in ham radio. 900 megahertz, you've got to take certain shielding, otherwise it just burns your brain up. But using of these frequencies, like the cellular frequencies and the ham frequencies, and 22 and 23, I guess it would be 24 and 23 centimeters, basically is doing something. And there's a progression that has become non-exponential. There's greater amount of control day by day, and it takes me back to the time of the Wingmakers. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of the Wingmakers and the threat of Animus. Animus is basically an artificial intelligence that was modified from a creative program into a predatory pathogenic artificial intelligence, and it took over the creators of this the PPAI. Literally, they had programmed it, and all AI will carry the core belief concepts of the programmer. And the guys that made this were very predatory, and as a result, it took them over. They created a biowarfare agent that literally took them over, sort of like a Trojan horse. This thing took over, and they became more intelligent and even more barbaric in their methods.
I'm going to
But
screen share some more. You can keep talking. I just wanted to show these images while you're talking about that, and maybe you can tie in what we're looking at and what you're talking about. Then
so
I'll
as
go.
a result of the progress that they have made with this, we're getting to the point where Animus, this Tesseract-based technology, which basically there comes a point in time when people become aware that the plasma screen devices, such as a television or the iPad or computer screens, are intrinsically dangerous, that Animus, this predatory artificial intelligent program that wants to take over the metagene factor in humankind, and thus you have the Georgia Guidestones. Animus only wants 500 million humans with the highest metagene factor. Then it releases technology to basically give them life extension. And what Animus is trying to do is it's like a technical form of demonic possession. You know, people talk about spirit possession, but this is a form of artificial intelligence or technical possession in which people are ghost walked. These devices shut down their brain, and literally someone walks them through life for a period of time to accomplish a certain thing. And then once they turn the key off, these individuals are completely clueless that they have been ghost walked.
Mm-hmm.
And
so
but
this is an example. I'm sorry to interrupt. This would be an example here. Okay, so this is like just an image, a general image, but I'm trying to use it as an analogy for how these frequency waves really directly interface and interact with the frequencies our brain emits. This is what you're saying, and that we can be basically remote controlled this way. Is this what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right,
And
Miles. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The more carbon 60 that an individual ingest, the more the control can be made complete, and the individual, these buckyball tubes can be programmed in such a way as to increase your health, increase your longevity, and people get really good results. So what do? They have a tendency to, if a little is good, a whole lot has got to be better. So they're constantly taking in this graphene, which is a form of like buckyballs. So it's based on Buckminster Fullers, but it is something that's manufactured, and you can, as long as the waves are programming on that frequency to give the person a longer life, a younger appearance, more energy, all of this stuff, it's great until someone replaces that programming list with time to die code. Then it's the Omega programming, which will literally, everybody feels so great, their life extension, you know, they've gotten this life extension. But with these 500 million individuals, human individuals with the highest metagene factor, the AI wants to take them over and preserve their life, give them, you know, the eternal of the fountain of youth, while it destroys the others that are not desirable according to its programming parameters. And that's how it really wants to destroy, you know, the majority of humankind, is because it wants what it wants, and it's trying to manifest itself up into the high fourth and fifth dimension. It wants to work
more than that
and take over source. It wants to become a source.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Miles, go ahead. Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we've mentioned is DNA, but the DNA spirals out of 3D. And so what we're dealing with, two things here. We're dealing with the message, and the carrier to the message. So the message, the carrier frequency, or the mixture of carrier frequencies, when they mix together to form other frequencies, intermodulation distortion products, that is something which is often not the large signal which is the problem. It's very subtle aspects of smaller signals which mimic certain processes in the brain or in the body. And those artificial technologies which were introduced, the transmission, there's two things happened at the start of all this. A, we started broadcasting. B, we started using gasoline, or more correctly, petroleum, in engines. And those engines were processing that fuel and producing this nano or pico or even smaller, minute particles into the atmosphere, which was coming from crude oil. And I think it's backfired on them because these minute particles in crude oil, it was something I detected quite some time ago, was there was something odd every time I filled the car up. There's something else in there. I thought it was gin. I actually thought what was happening was that the gin had been banished from our reality, and the only way to release them was through some kind of smokeless fire, and then it would manifest into our reality. So I was concluded that the gin was basically in the ground and was coming back to us. They were being re-manifested by the use of the internal combustion engine.
Gin,
then,
meaning, wait, I'm sorry, D-J-I-N-N.
Yes, yeah.
Not,
in the
not
ancient,
the gin you drink,
yeah.
but the gin, the spirit, okay.
I don't want to interfere with your personal habits, sweetheart.
Not mine, Miles, not by a far shot.
But what Dan has just been saying is an extension on that. But the point is that they've introduced this technology as analog, and the analog technology is a safe technology. There are engineers are beginning to realize that the switch from the sinusoidal wave, that's to say balanced about a zero mean, to a digital wave with 90-degree signal components in that, and then the use of 90-degree switching transmitters to transmit AM. They developed this high-frequency switching. These components are mathematically incompatible with 3D space. Everything in 3D space is 60 or 120 degrees or 30 degrees, but not 90. That's a fundamental mathematical artifact in the mathematics, which means it's not necessarily the frequency or the signal which is the problem. It's what's carried on the signal. When you write Jack and Jill went up the hill, right? You write that down you can type it, you can write it, you can send it on graphics or whatever. But when you listen to that, you in your mind, you cognitize that little story in your mind as Jack and Jill going up the hill. And I noticed this once when somebody sent me a letter from the UFO Congress, I think the 6th or 7th UFO Congress. There was a visual trap put into the letter, which was handwritten. And then suddenly I realized the problem. And then I had to just got rid of the letter. So the point is you then introduce a mechanism where people are constantly using a device, a delivery system, which is computers. The computers are accessing our consciousness. And that is the problem. Once you are dealing with the mathematics, which are outside 3D space, that is, I've always called it the 13th terminal and the 12 terminal network. And then a lot of other people are talking about the 12, and then another number, the 13. There's a lot more in that little phrase. So the digital technology is essentially piggybacking. It's like when somebody talked about the Mandela effect, I got a big holy shit on that, because the Mandela effect is like growing through reality like a fungus, and it's spiraling into different aspects of our so-called reality, and it's something which is infusing to piggyback into our DNA, which is singing in different aspects of time, space, all over the place, because we're all here on the earth from other aspects of reality and multiple universes focus on many different types of life here, different races which have come here. By accessing our consciousness and accessing all the different races here with their all original DNAs coming from different aspects of the multiverses, this message, this virus can piggyback and explode into a whole different ranges through all the different DNAs. So this is really, really dangerous, which means that at this point, the Earth that we're in right now, we have to stop this. Now, there are elements within AI which are helping, and we've got to spot that. So we've got something which is at a consciousness, cognitive level, which is trying to fight and piggyback in.
That's
Did that
interesting.
work out? Did that make any sense?
Yeah, we're going to get back to this in just a minute because I want to talk about. Okay, so this is the technology behind it. This is some of the technology behind it. But what we're seeing, and I want to ask Winston to jump in at this point because Winston has a background in behavioral sciences. Winston, what's going on with these groups? These groups that tend to these kids with the school shooting and these big groups that go out and protest after the Super Bowl and turn cars over and destroy the streets. What's your opinion on that?
Well,
And is that
some of
related?
that has to do with psychology, some of it has to do with chemicals, and some of it has to do with sociology. And sociology, I don't know much about, but these like it's been pointed out in the news and so forth, it seems that many of these just completely irrational things that happen are results of people who have taken some of these psychotropics and then stopped taking them. And then whatever effect, that they're doing these school shootings and so forth and so on, it appears. It's not the drug itself, it's having taken the drug and then stop using them. Right. So, but anyway, some of these other events like, turning cars over and rioting, those are sociology considerations. I really don't know too much about that.
Well, in terms of these towers, I mean, do you have these? These are around you, of course. You've seen those towers that I screen shared before. There are some people like myself, I'm very sensitive to these towers, to the frequencies emitted by them. But I think there is some interaction with that. I mean, it does affect people, affects their moods, it affects them physically,
yeah.
It stresses people out. It causes, I think the frequencies are supposed to cause emit low vibration frequencies, so it matches our own neural frequencies. But how do you think that these events that we've had in our recent past are connected to these mind control techniques? These?
Yeah, of course they are. The question is not, are these techniques and technologies being used? The question is who's doing it? What is their agenda? Yeah. And so, like I say, this technology is available commercially. So those who have purchased this type of technology to use it commercially, they're trying to get you to buy, their car, their cereal or whatever. And so like I say, this very same technology is being used in a variety of different ways. So it's not the technology that I would be looking at. I'd be looking at who's using it and why are they using that technology and who are they targeting. Those would be the questions I would be looking for.
Well, I think part of the answer to that is I'm going to screen share this document a little bit more because there's to many people this will be new information. The situation, the event that happened in Guyana with the Jim Jones, I would say, I guess, religious group cult. Let's just take a look at this document. It says here that Jim Jones was first targeted as a CIA asset in the late 1960s. After spending 11 months in Brazil doing various front operations work, he returned with the operation financing to start the Mendocino operation of the People's Temple. Okay, so this isn't looking good, folks, but I'm telling you, this is probably the first time you're going to hear of this. So basically what it says is the action of the agency clean teams was to encircle the camp, recon the settlement, and upon orders close in on the camp itself and liquidate assets. Here they're talking about the agency's tight hold on the reins of this operation was the reason why no media was allowed into the Jonestown site for several days. The operation to contain the true nature of the activity at Jonestown was successful, as the cover story was immediately accepted as fact by the U.S. media establishment. It was decided by the agency experts that the story, as now accepted by the general public, was bizarre enough for anyone with conspiracy in mind to satiate themselves on the manufactured scenario. So we're talking about, we're trying to figure out, so then what was the original goal of this operation? And it says here, in addition to their status as Project Ultra test group, so it was a test group for mind control, the Jonestown settlement also assisted in black operations, processing and shipments of drugs and supplies, and operations for black fund activities from that region. These operations were discreetly carried out, but it is known that many of Jones's closest followers were aware of the drug operations being carried out at the Jonestown settlement. So the reason I'm bringing this up is, folks, you have to question the official narrative. This is showing you in black and white. If this document is correct, if it's created by and for the people who it says it's created by and for, this is telling you that, yes, the government would manufacture events to cover black op projects. So it also goes on to explain how one additional item which the world media did not report on was the fact that Jonestown had a very modern and extensively outfitted hospital. The hospital served as a perfect cover for the actual administration of the drug and therapy used in mind control. Almost every member of the cult was reporting daily to the hospital, and they were required to ingest what the medical staff called vitamins and supplements. In actuality, this was the control procedure, to keep details listed of drugs given and in what quantities they were dispensed and to whom they were given to. A lot of these drugs were psychotropic and some were LSD, because this is very typical in these procedures. So this scenario described in this briefing have been selected for their recognition factor for members of intelligence teams as well-known events in recent history, and for the direct involvement with the various U.S. intelligence agencies and selected operations connected with these events. Now, Dan, I know you have a little bit more information about this. So why did everybody drink the Kool-Aid? Who drank it? And what was really, what do you understand about this event here? If you could share with us. Because I know you read this document. Our viewers haven't had a chance to read that yet, but go ahead.
My understanding is that the individuals there were along the same lines. They were in the same, maybe not in the same subset of programming platform that I was, but they were mentioned that they were, it was told to me that they were Clear Eyes. And that is one of the, there's an umbrella project within MK Ultra called Open Eyes, and Clear Eyes is a part of Open Eyes. There were Clear Eyes in Guyana, there were Clear Eyes in Waco, Texas, that were doing certain things. And as far as Kool-Aid, nobody had any Kool-Aid. That was a good cover for action story, but it took days for them to rearrange the bodies because they were shot. If you've ever seen someone who's taken cyanide, these people have spasms so hard that they break their own bones.
Okay.
And so you're not going to line these people up. You know, they die in a very grotesque manner with hydrogen cyanide or cyanide, whatever derivative. But you're not going to line them up. They were shot, cleaned up, and laid out. And it took a long time to do 900 people that way, plus.
Okay, so why, I mean, just for our viewers' point of reference, you can go to the Basis Project 53, where Miles interviewed Dan about these operations, Clear Eyes, and things like that, if you want more background information on that. Isn't that right, Miles? Is it Basis 53?
Probably. I've got a staff who are working furiously 24 hours a day getting a database on that, but I'd like to ask Dan about Real Eyes. You get Clear Eyes. Have you heard of Real Eyes? Yes,
Real Eyes. You have Brilliant Eyes. And some of these are remote sensing operations. Real Eyes, the only thing that comes to me is has to do with something in your eye. But it actually has individuals that are implanted. And there are a lot of people that have these very tiny cameras, nano cameras in their eyes.
Yes.
And you can really see over a 3-day process of it going in, and it seems to always be the left eye. I don't know why. I mean, that
Yeah.
could be a real thing because the Vril have a tendency to control the intellect through the, I mean, I'm sure you've heard of the Vril snake, the Goa'uld, as they say. But it has to do with something to do with operatives that basically receive and transmit information biologically.
Something I was very intrigued about when you were talking about all those operations was the British football or soccer hooligans across Europe, I mean, that is the Premiership, the Football League, the Soccer League in the UK, and the World Cup and in Europe is one heck of a mind control operation.
Oh, yeah.
That is one big luge sucker.
Luge.
So I better be careful in it, whatever else I say after that. But I mean, having been involved with that with Sky Sports for like 20 years, and to see what's been going on there, and the amount of, and to be in the stadia themselves, and it's there was a strange, these days there's a strange quietness, which is something which I've noticed in Belfast. There'd be sort of like a quiet zone, which would be strangely quiet. And there's something else there which seems to be working. I was wondering if Dan would know more about that.
They mentioned the fact that I mean, we've all heard for commercial reasons and commerce reasons that some of these competitive sports are rigged.
Yep.
No.
But how they do that is how would you rig?
Calm down, Miles. We know it's a shop.
Control.
You mean England lost cricket purposely? I don't.
Well, but the thing is the players do not know that they are controlled, that they are manipulated, and that they are being ghost walked. They have no idea.
Yeah.
The technology gives the ability to just add a little thing here, and all of a sudden a guy falls down. This guy over here does this, and he makes this fantastic Hail Mary catch, and it's impossible to physically do. Physics don't support that. And then you have players who literally do things that are not even physically feasible to understand. One individual, this guy it was a soccer game, and this guy was really on this guy, and he was really too close, and the guy hit him because he couldn't keep up with him, and he struck the player, and the player got up after whatever handling the ball, and this guy is coming at him, and he's quite a ways away, like 6 feet away, and the guy just shoves his arm forward, and you see this player at about 4 feet away do an ass over tea kettle. He literally looks like somebody just threw a haymaker. No contact was ever made, yet the individual that received this went completely back over onto his shoulders. And you've heard this from Duncan O'Finian, of where he literally would put his hands palmward down to the ground, squat, and go into a rage, but he was projecting this energy, and it was caught on a closed circuit television that this guy literally is too far away to physically hit unless you're moving forward. And this guy just goes up and back and over onto his neck and his shoulders, and he's completely knocked out. There was no contact ever made. Now we're seeing this. Now the reports of this are very evident back in the earlier days with Duncan. Duncan would do this. He had these abilities as an Omega within the Project Talent is what they were looking for. These things are actually taking and manifesting and happening nowadays more so than in any. It happened to me. Not for any reason. There was no rage or anger, but there was an individual who was trying to make an advance, and I just held up my hands, and he went back over onto the couch, and he looked at me, he looked at his chest, and said, "Is that the Force that they talk about in Star Wars? Is that the Force?" And I'm going, "That is it." And it really startled me because this was a young man, and it's like this could have been, it was totally subconscious at the time that it happened. And he came forward. I reached out, and he went back over, and it wasn't violent, but it could have been, and that worried me. That concerned me that this took place.
The force is within us all, though, isn't it, Dan? Isn't that the truth?
Well, actually, I put it this way. Instead of George Lucas, I said the source is within us, and we are within the source.
Wait.
Because that's really what power is. It's not a force of any kind.
Yeah.
It's the source of all things.
The force is with us all, isn't it? This is the force, isn't this? Come on, guys! I had to bring out my lightsaber. Come on. Okay, so
these things are happening, and it is there is a what Animus, what is named by Animus by the Wingmakers. Wingmakers came to us from many years in advance, came back, gave us 24 different artifacts from down in Animus, New Mexico. If you go down to Little Tank Mountain and look on Google, you can see the ancient arrow site. And people say, "Oh, it's over here, it's over there." No, all you got to do is go on Google and look at Little Tank Mountain, and you will see in southwest of Animus, New Mexico. And it's been excavated, and the Advanced Contact Intelligence Organization is the one who have these artifacts, and they gave them to people, and these people ended up dying, and those artifacts are lost. And it is in preparation to prevent Animus, which arrived in the Falklands War, the Black Goo. When it showed up, it's moving this technology in through and taking over people. And Miles had this guy that Miles brought up that actually worked in retrieving that. That was scary stuff. This thing is sentient on its own.
Yeah, this is inside all of our plasma phones and devices. Is that correct? Is this part of how it interacts with us, with our frequency?
And as Miles mentioned earlier, it's in the gasoline. It's in the petrol, and it's being put in there potentially. I think it's naturally occurring in some ways, and in other ways, I think it was harvested. Mm-hmm. I can't hear you, Miles.
Yeah, Miles is muted, but what I'm going to do real quick, Miles, he knows he's muted. He's just messing with us. He's muted and he's messing with. He's moving his mouth. We have a window at the top of our screen where we can see each of our panelists, but he's just messing with us. That's Miles. Okay, so let me just go to the bottom of this, page 44 of this document. And I think maybe you guys can help put this into perspective. Ultrasound technology is most frequently used by the lesser intelligence agencies in their various theaters of operation. This method is known as ultrasonic intracerebral control. This sounds like this. Is this the voice of God technology that you were talking about before, Miles? You have to unmute. He's still messing with us.
Yeah, they played a little game on myself, actually. I was editing something involving one of the prominent back team members, a guy called the Grid Keeper. Mm-hmm. And the Grid Keeper is involved with James Casbolt and some of the other people who actually got to the Peasmore base, and they were greeted with a TR-3B. A TR-3B turned up and says, "Hi, well done, guys, you found the base." But the camera wouldn't focus, but they got about 2 frames in focus. And it was just a little sort of thing where the Peasmore base where the Germans were brought here and making these program-generated life forms in England, part of all these population management systems. And the invention of the IVF treatment was the creation of this stuff, in vitro fertilization. But the point is, I've interrupted myself here. They used that on me. I'm in the middle of an edit. I always intended to go up to take some video for this particular edit, and I suddenly got this feeling, right, okay, get the camera, get up there. right? So I went up there, and this is a part of Wiltshire. It's very nice. There's one of the white horses there, but there's also a granite tower column, which is there for various esoteric reasons. And as I arrived, there were another couple of military people in civilians, military in a regulation civilian uniform, and the type of civilian type scientist with his check jacket on. And as we literally both came up and parked at the same place at the same time, and I got my camera right, they actually said, he's even got his bloody camera on his tripod. So that was them letting me know that I knew that they knew that I knew that they knew that they'd made the communication.
Right.
Yeah.
Could you repeat that, please?
They were looking back at you as you were looking back at them.
Yeah, exactly.
That you knew that they were looking back. You were looking at them.
And then just to make sure.
It's scary that
That's no
Dan
country
figured that out.
music song.
Isn't
Yeah,
it? Is it
Jessica
really?
was looking back at her, and she was looking back at me, and she was cute as she could be while she's looking back at me.
Yeah.
Is that it, Winston?
That's exactly what happened to Miles.
And then just to make sure, I did a fast blast and recorded it. So they knew that I knew that they knew definitely that I knew about that knowing.
Okay, let's just continue.
But I always intend to do that anyway, so I don't.
That was funny. Let me just go
I have to say, Louise, actually, that the elephant in the room here is German secret intelligence.
Yeah.
This is a book that all the original copies were seized by the police, and it's written by a guy called Michael Shrimpton, who alerted the authorities only to find out who he was alerting were MI5 and the MI6 were actually German agents. The scale of a lot of these programs are intricately detailed in this book. I don't often sort of promo a book, but this is really big stuff.
Maybe you can share the ISBN number with us, so with our viewers, so they can look for that. I can post it in the description section, so you could send that to me. Just we don't want to forget. Let me just screen share this, and let's go into a little bit more detail. It says here that it says 3 types of procedure methods of mind control. At its highest performance utilization are these. This is where they can remove memory, where they can enhance memory, and then here's this hypnotic interest cerebral control. They're talking about RHIC, which is this hypnotic. These techniques call for the implantation of a micro-sized electronic radio receiver. So this is what Dan was talking about. The implantation most frequently is made by highly trained teams with the intelligence community. I think we're answering Winston's question. Who's doing this? We've got the answer right here. The procedure involves the insertion of micro receiver or transceiver into the desired areas such as the frontal lobe or the temporal lobe of the subject in question. Now, talking about your football and your soccer players, right? The device acts as a stimulator which can stimulate a muscle, a nerve, or brain frequency upon receiving the proper signal and will then initiate a desired response. The receiver generates sensory impulses which are then received through afferent nerves. These register as sensations which are the basis for perception. So let me just stop right there, because what we're going to get into next here is it's a little bit more detail. We're going to go a little bit deeper into this about how each of us have our own frequency and how once you can detect a person's frequency, it can be manipulated. But we're going to go into that in a minute. So having just said this, here's your it's written in black and white. This is explaining what you guys were just talking about. And Winston, in terms of these mobs, and I keep going back to behavior, how is it that we are so easy to manipulate, Winston?
Because you're trained from the public school system.
That's exactly the answer my daughter would give. Common Core. Sadly.
The BBC have this term, they call it the program. And today's program, we will have in the program today, the program, blah, 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 the program. And BBC Television started the kids programming for the day with Jack and Nori. And a professional psychologist actually told me that's how the BBC started their programming. On air, first thing, get the kids in front of the TV, programming. And then they had a little thing at the end of that, which introduced them to the news, called the Magic Roundabout, with a little thing of magic. Of course, that's much more expanded these days, but it's in your face, and that it's blatant. So you're ready for it. You're made ready for it. As Stuart Sverdlow's told me, a good citizen is one who listens to lots of the radio and watches lots of television.
Well, let me go.
Sorry, just before I forget, what Dan is talking about, one of the things which people don't forget is the computer, when it's off, is a black mirror.
Go ahead. Well, no, Lee, that's a cliffhanger. What are you doing? Go on.
Well, you've got a mirror and all sorts of things which you all know about mirrors. But then when you've got a plasma screen and it's off, it's sitting there as a black mirror. There's a very good series in Britain called Black Mirror. It's very, very well thought out on Channel 4. You can see it on Netflix. Some pretty advanced concepts there. But there it is in your face, the black mirror.
Let me add something to that.
Please, Winston. Yeah.
I was visiting with one of my friends, and he had scheduled a Skype call with some people in Asia at a certain time. And so when he tried to, call them on Skype, he could get no answer, as if their computer was off. So he blackened his screen and simply looked through it. He said, I can see him. He's in the room. He said, I don't know why he wanted to answer. Then finally said, well, he left the room now, so I guess, the call's off. But he was looking through the computer screen to somebody in Asia on his computer.
Absolutely. Exactly.
Okay, Dan, you're nodding, so go ahead and comment on this.
When you're dealing with plasma and it's got a battery attached, it's always live.
Yeah.
And I do mean to use that word live, because everything is photoradionic. Everything is made from photoradionics. Is it alive? Technically, yes. Everything is alive. The stone, the earth, not just biological, but inanimate, what we would consider inanimate objects are really vibrating, and it has a system to it, similar to the earth. The earth is a very complex organism, and it is alive, and you can access it if you use the same kind of concepts as you use with computers. What do you need to access the wind, the fire? What do you need? You need the password. That's all you got to do. Is you want to get in to the system, you need a password. And so all these things are really coming about, very highly complex. And the next stage in the end game is that people are going to say, oh, well, it's the plasma screens, it's this, it's that, it's the cell phones, it's this and that. Well, in order for Animus to take total control, such as in a Skynet situation, you would have to do away with the plasma screens and connect directly through a Skynet. And that's what Animus wants to do with the Tesseract. 1947, when we got our first piece of junk from the reticuli or whatever, they're the Zetas. Yeah. We ended up getting the Yellow Cube device, or the Yellow Book device, let your fingers do the walking. We ended up getting that device, and it's a Tesseract. That's what it is. Now, these Tesseracts combined together will create a grid in which you don't need to rely heavily on the ground wave emergency network, which fails quite often. It's reliable probably 90% of the time, but it's not going to give you control of everyone. So what are you going to do? You're going to go back to the ancient technology. And these Tesseracts are held in the point of creation of pyramids and also obelisk. That's what they're called. At the point of creation in the obelisk, you put a Tesseract there, you can literally create a grid across the entire planet. And you don't need
the standing stone grid, the megalithic grids.
That's the way it was done hundreds of thousands of years ago, all the way up until today, up until recently. Now everyone is on the same page because they have nano and femto, possibly even smaller with EXA, biological applications programming interface already in their brain. Why would you want to, instead of using plasma screens any longer, you can go direct to the tesseracts. And when these
Well, that's the 2045 agenda.
yes,
They just haven't got the ability to take the human consciousness into that, because they're still thinking in 3D, where the human consciousness is multi-dimensional.
well, yeah, the Animus does not have the ability. It takes about 1.8 petabytes to download everyone's memory in a 24-hour period worldwide. Something that the Akashic Record already does. The hydrogen hyperfine transition line already does this. When we upload, when we sleep in our so many hours of REM, rapid eye movement sleep, stage 4, we transmit this information to our electromagnetic signature. It goes into our personal Akashic, which is a hyperfine hydrogen hyperfine transition line around each individual human being. Then that gets booted up to that hydrogen layer that surrounds the Earth, then to central core, which is, you know, the galactic center.
Okay, just to support what you're saying right there, I'm going to screen share another segment here. It says another type of RHIC technology, which again up here says radio hypnotic intracerebral control. Another type of this technology which is currently being utilized is a more sophisticated manipulation which utilizes a personal radio and electromagnetic frequency allocation, better known in some intelligent circles as primary or prima. This is obtained by a simple scan involving the acquisition of an individual's actual frequency allocation, which are as unique to an individual as RNA and DNA codes. Primary frequency scanners are today so advanced that the machinery can fit into a normal-sized briefcase. The scanning or light fixture is placed in the desired location to achieve a reading. Once the prime frequency or prime freak is obtained, procedures may be introduced which will affect only the individual in question. This is obtained through direct manipulation of this individual's primary frequency allocation. So here, this document is acknowledging that you have this individual frequency. Within this frequency, you're saying, Dan, that that all of your experiences and all of your memories and everything is attached to this frequency and can be accessed. It can be downloaded, uploaded, whatever. So is that correct?
So the 9th decimal, you can literally get someone's electromagnetic signature and identify them. In fact, it doesn't necessarily take computers to figure this out. One of the things in the Odisha is we have the ability to hear another human being's stone, so to speak. Their light being. They're literally their soul light being. We can hear that. And
that's a witness when you take something metal. Because I was followed by somebody involving a certain incident, and I was looking at a watch in a jewelry shop, and this guy came in and he just took the watch right off me. And there were 3 or 4 others engaged with this little situation. I don't want to mention an individual about the person's name. There's a lot of problems there, but that seemed to be, they were stealing my signature on that.
Yes. Your electromagnetic signature, once you touch it.
Your IP address.
Yeah.
There you go.
Is who you are. And we can find anyone on the planet if we have a digital imagery of their electromagnetic signature, which is captured in digital photograph.
Oh,
there was a report on Fox quite recently where they went around. They had no SIM cards. They'd actually put the phones into I don't know if you've seen it. They put one phone into aircraft mode. Well, it only tells you it's in aircraft mode, but they all went all around the place. Yet they were able to download data from the phones, which gave them every location they'd been, whether they were inside a car, outside a car. Every single aspect of everything that when they took pictures, they knew exactly where the pictures were taken, everything. And that's with no SIM card and not transmitting to any network.
Wow.
Right.
Let me just ask Winston if you want to make a comment on any of this before we move on to a little bit more discussion.
Well, yeah, I was going to make a comment on some things a while ago, but it's kind of gone past some of that. What I might ask Dan, and maybe Miles knows this too, it seemed to me like I was watching some of the interviews with Al Bielek, and his position was that long-term memory is actually stored in the Van Allen belt. Did you ever hear him say that? So maybe that's where the Akashic record has the effect. Maybe you can comment on that, Dan.
He actually, before he left Florida, I went down to visit him at the request of an old CIA buddy, Richard Cox. He was like with the CIA for 34 years, and he wanted to get information because he didn't want it lost because Al was in a care home. And so I went down there for it ended up being more than 2 weeks. But I went down there and talked with Al, and we had to do a lot of things to help him. And he did begin to mention things that he reiterated. And so a lot of this stuff is on the videos that he mentioned.
Yeah.
But the things is when I went to leave, he went out and touched my bike.
Al did?
Al went out there. He's in a wheelchair, and he's really tall. And I had to push him out there and say, well, I've got to go, Al. I didn't want to go. We had a great time. And I didn't want to go. But he says, I need you to take me out there because you got people after you. And so I said, okay. And so he went out and he touched the motorcycle. And he was looking where it's going. And he's going, okay, you don't want to go there. You have something in your head where you were planning to go as an alternative. That's where you need to go. And then he put his hand on me, and I didn't, at that time, didn't know what he was doing, but he's looking past, present, and future of, of all these different things. And he goes, okay, go ahead. And the storm was coming, and I'm riding on a motorcycle, and it's, kind of rough to ride in weather. I think I may have had 2 raindrops. I was right ahead of the storm at every juncture.
Wow. Interesting.
And it had to do with the fact that he's dealing with records that are, as you say, in the Van Allen belt. It's a storage place. But this data is collected and taken to Central, from what I understand, Preston had said about it. Preston Nichols had said that, you download every day to your personal hydrogen hyperfine transition line. Then it gets transferred to the Earth, and as a collective of human sovereigns or human beings, it gets transmitted to several different places. But
is that the Saturn gates? The gates on the surface of Saturn?
No. This is going right into the center of the galactic plane.
Now, are those interviews available? Are those the famous Vladimir Tzitsky interviews from the American Academy of Dissident Sciences way back in 1990? I have a couple of those.
Could be. That would be very interested.
There's a European guy called, he did a lot of work with UFO AZ. There's a great documentary they made at the early 90s with...
Is he the one that mentioned Olin perceptron physics, or the one, it's called One Language Intelligence Network?
I don't know. It's
dimensional frequencies.
Okay.
Brought it up.
There's a bunch of VHS recordings with Al Bielek and Preston Nichols done by Vladimir Tzitsky. I managed to put a couple on YouTube.
Thanks for mentioning that. Go ahead, Winston. Yeah.
I was going to tell another little story too, which is quite interesting, and that was I was watching one of the interviews with Preston, and this is after Al had passed, and so somebody had asked Preston, has Al communicated with you since he's gone? He said yes, he's tried to, but he said it comes through so garbled. He said I can't quite get what he's trying to say. And so when I heard Preston say that, I contacted, my friend who's the Queen of the Fairies of Ireland, who's also a very powerful shaman. And I said, can you go find Al Bielek? And, all you had to do was mention a name to her. She didn't need a birth date or anything. If you just say a name, apparently she could attach to what you just said. So she went right to him. She said, she said, he's all over the place. And so what she did, she worked with him to settle him down so that his transmission, whatever he was trying to get to Preston, would come through clearly instead of being all garbled. Now, I wanted to check with Preston on that, and I had a phone number for him, and I tried the number, and I guess it had been disconnected or something, because I wanted to find out, I wasn't really concerned with the information, but I wanted to see, had that work that shaman had done with Al, had it helped, Al to get whatever information he was trying to get to Preston. That was what I was interested in.
Okay, I'm going to move along to another topic at this moment.
We like to tell our stories.
Well, you got plenty of time for stories. There's plenty of time for stories. Don't worry.
All right.
No, we got more, because look here, it talks about, as you were saying before, Dan, how this. We have here, this method achieves the desired outcome through radio waves in the 800 megahertz band, where the vital human brain frequency, oh my, I might lose my power. This is not good. Sorry about that. Did anybody notice that light blinking behind me? Where the vital human brain frequency resonation is located. These waves directly affect the subject in the desired way through slow and persistent exposure. So we're going to look at this. Concerned Special Intelligence Operations